Hello, and welcome to my presentation for Computer Science 360. For this presentation, I decided to cover some parts of scheduling, which we have gone over in class earlier in the semester. I chose this concept because understanding exactly how a CPU works has always been a challenging and really attractive idea to me, since they're essentially the brain of the computer. Understanding them is a large piece of the puzzle when it comes to appreciating computers. And within that, the concept of scheduling is a very significant part of it. Now, of course, there is much more to CPUs than just scheduling. In my opinion, it's one of the simplest parts about them, making it much easier to discuss when compared to the actual architecture of processing units, which can become overwhelming really quickly due to how ridiculous they are in terms of depth and scale once you start looking at them at the transistor level. Since this presentation needs to be pretty short, we're going to be discussing and comparing the different methods for process scheduling and their requirements, which will require talking a little bit about the basics first. So the first thing that we need to know is that a CPU core can only work on one task at a time. Modern CPUs, of course, have an ever increasing amount of cores, but still act in the same one task per core way. Even multi-threading is just switching between tasks super quickly, which doesn't break the rule that we've established. The main concern of scheduling is how are we going to assign tasks to a core in a way which is fast and also capable of fairly handling all the other tasks, which we also need to get done. A metaphor I like to help me to imagine what a scheduler is like is that a CPU is like a water hose, and tasks are containers, which are completed by being filled with water. Larger tasks are containers which contain more volume and therefore take longer to fill or complete, and the hose can only fill one container at a time, but can swap between them to ensure every container doesn't stay empty for too long. Furthermore, the flow rate of the hose can be related to the speed or clock rate of the CPU. Faster CPU is a hose which can fill these containers more quickly. Now, getting into the methods, the simplest and probably the first way that we think to solve this problem is to just complete each task one after the other as they come in. This is called first come, first serve, and operates exactly how it sounds. Now, there are some benefits to this. It's really easy to implement, of course, and is very fair to each task, just like a line of people at a supermarket. This completely avoids something problematic called starvation, which is when a task is never given CPU time and as a result is never completed. Given there's no infinitely long task, every process will be completed if there's enough time. Such a method is a good fit for simple systems and is really easy to predict. The main downside is that this algorithm can result in something called the convoy effect, which is when a large task eats up CPU time, holding up smaller tasks, which would have been completed quickly if given the chance. It's kind of like a semi-truck on a single lane highway holding up traffic behind it. To prevent this issue, we can instead do shortest job first. This effectively prevents the convoy effect from happening, since the longest task is always done last. Now, this is only true if all the tasks have arrived at the same time, which isn't the case in reality, since the computer is constantly completing and generating new processes. That being said, as long as we have a list of tasks that we can sort by time needed to complete, we can prevent the issue caused by first come, first serve. As you can imagine, however, if we have an infinite stream of tasks coming in, really long processes might be constantly pushed to the back as new and shorter tasks are inserted ahead of it, which can cause starvation. To prevent these issues, we need to be able to switch the current task that the CPU is working on, even if it hasn't completed it. This is called a preemptive scheduler. The previous two that we talked about would be considered non-preemptive, of course. An example of a preemptive scheduler method is shortest time to completion first. As the slightly longer title infers, this method prioritizes the task which will finish the soonest and can switch between tasks before finishing whatever it's currently working on. Basically, if a shorter task appears, the CPU switches to it. This means that the small tasks are going to be finished more rapidly, but again, larger tasks might be put on the back burner, so to speak, if smaller tasks continuously keep coming in. So these methods can make sure that the frequency of tasks being completed by the CPU is maximized, which is great. But in doing so, we've allowed for big tasks to potentially go missing. Kind of makes the simplicity of first come, first serve more appealing, but as we'll see later, it's not really applicable. So to fix this, there's a method called round-robin scheduling. It works by giving each task its own piece of CPU time called a time quantum. Basically, it allows every task to get a turn before a larger task can hog the CPU, or smaller tasks can starve a larger one. For example, if we have 3 tasks, each requiring 5 seconds to be completed, then round robin might spend 1 second on each task at a time in a consistent sequence. So if we have task A, B, and C, it will do A, B, and C, A, B, and C, A, B, and C 5 times in a row, totaling 15 seconds. This results in all 3 of the tasks being completed around the same time, meaning that no task had to wait longer than another, which would have happened in something like first come, first serve. Now, switching between tasks does take a small amount of CPU time, so the time quantum must not be so small that the CPU spends most of its time switching instead of working on and completing tasks. It must also not be too large, or else it will just end up acting like first come, first serve. It won't be switching between tasks and divvying up that time. Now, to complicate things further, we also have to sometimes wait for a response from input and output before a task can be completed. The time spent waiting can instead be used to start work on another task which isn't waiting for a response. However, once we do get a response for that original question, we need to switch back to it, since it would now be ready to be worked on once it gets a response from input or output. Furthermore, certain tasks need to be completed more quickly, like mouse and keyboard clicks, for the sake of rapid user feedback. These tasks are more important and must be prioritized over less important tasks, like updates and things that generally do not need to be completed as soon as possible. We can measure how important a task is by seeing how often it gives up its CPU time to wait for a response from input-output. Other tasks, which just take up time but don't need to wait on inputs, are considered a lower priority. So with all this in mind, our schedule must, 1, not waste time on inputs, waiting on inputs, not spend too much time on really large tasks, fairly spend CPU time among tasks so that large tasks are not outright ignored, and of course, prioritize tasks which frequently need to wait for responses. To do this, we use a method called multi-level level feedback queue. This method uses multiple queues, each with a different priority level. When a task first comes in, it goes to the top priority queue, which gets worked on in small time quanta. If the task isn't completed by the first few quanta and isn't frequently waiting for responses, then it gets bumped down to a lower queue, which employs larger time quantums, and so forth. This method treats its queues like super problems, which have larger time quantums and lower the queue. Of course, if a queue is empty, then it should be skipped and moved to the next one until it reaches the bottom, the lowest queue, and then moves back to the top. This method solves all of our requirements since it doesn't starve short tasks as they come in. It prioritizes important tasks while also organizing them based off of response frequency and size. And it doesn't starve large tasks, which get placed in lower queues, since every single queue gets visited, which means every single task is going to get a certain amount of time, just like round robin. So yeah, those are some of the methods used and how they work in accordance with fairly completing large and dynamic amounts of tasks. Thank you for listening.